Hello everyone, good morning and thank you all for joining our webcast today. I'm Nick Whiting of Redcare and today is all about how alarm signalling is going to change. The UK is switching to an all-IP digital phone service which is going to affect alarm signalling. On our webcast today we're going to discuss what the digital switchover is all about, how you can prepare and protect your customers and what it means for your businesses. And by the end of this session we'll give you the information you need so you'll better understand the switchover and why you should be working with the people leading the change to secure your future. And today I'm joined by John Livermore, All IP Industry Engagement Manager at Openreach, and Darren Davey, our Head of Sales. I'll hand over to Darren and John now to give a quick intro and say why they're involved in today's webcast. Darren, over to you first.
Okay, thanks Nick, and good morning everyone. I'm Darren Davey and I head up the sales team here at BT Redcare. It's my pleasure today to be sharing a Q&A with you later this morning at the end of the webinar, and welcome all your questions to the move to all IP or Redcare in general. So now over to our guest, John Livermore from Openreach.
Good morning everyone, and thank you for your time today. I'm John Livermore. I work for Openreach in the All IP team, and I'm here today to give you an update on the programme's progress and what it means for you. I'd like to thank Redcare for the opportunity and thank you for your time.
Thanks John and thanks Darren. So now I'll kick off with what the move to all IP is about. So what's happening and why? At the moment, phone calls in the UK and many alarm services like digital communicators still use the analogue public switch telephone network known as PSTN provided by Openreach. The technology that powers the PSTN hasn't really changed since the first public automatic telephone exchange opened in the early 1900s. So it's now time that we need to move to a new digital network that's ready for the future. Because of this, the PSTN is being shut down and the UK will move to a new all-IP digital network by 2025. In Mildenhall and Salisbury, this will be earlier, but more about that later from John. So what does this mean for you? Well, first of all, it's going to be a significant challenge for installers as you'll need to take action for every device that is using the PSTN to send its alarms or data, including those digital communicators. If homes and businesses don't upgrade their alarm signalling systems by 2025, they will be left unprotected. Because as soon as your customer upgrades their phone service, if they've not upgraded their alarm signalling, then it will stop working. So it's best to plan and prepare as soon as possible. Laboratory testing is offered to manufacturers to test their PSTN dial-up devices from BT, and Redcare have tested the Redcare Secure 2 and 3 products, and they're the ones that use PSTN dial-up as a backup to the GPRS service. And we found that it does work in that lab environment using the PSTN dial-up service and the ATA. But our recommendation from the beginning has been that even these devices need to be upgraded to IP. Luckily for the Secure 2 and 3, they have IP on board, so that upgrade is somewhat easier. It's also worth to note that the other reason we've decided to recommend that from the beginning we upgrade these is that the new digital network is not designed to transmit these analog signals. To prepare and protect your customers, we need to help you transition your customers to IP and or 4G based alarm signalling, as this will give them peace of mind for the years ahead. For existing and new customers, you need to think carefully. To get the most reliable and connected solution, you need to consider what the most future-proof option is. The digital network will create new innovations and opportunities for the security industry, but they'll also interlink and work across the same digital platforms. So you should consider which supplier is best placed to help you prepare for what's coming next. Just before I hand over to John Livermore to discuss Openreach's work on the digital switchover, we'd like to show you a quick video to explain the move to all IP further.
By 2025, all communications in the UK will take place on a future-proof all IP digital network. At the moment, landline calls in the UK and many alarm services still use the analogue public switch telephone network or PSTN service provided by Openreach. It's time to move on because the tech that powers the PSTN hasn't really changed since the first public automatic telephone exchange opened in 1912, which means it can't keep up with today's digital demands. It's time for a new network that's fit for the future. The switchover will mean that alarm signalling and phones will no longer work like they do today. Phones won't work in a power cut, and alarms won't be able to send signals to alert anyone. Also, mobile operators are starting to close their 3G networks, and 2G is likely to follow. So we need to begin to transition to new systems that run on the modern all-IP network, 4G wireless networks, or a combination of both. It sounds like an inconvenience, but really, it's an opportunity to move on to better, more reliable, and feature-rich services to better protect what matters most to your customers. This means that if your customer's fire, security, or any other alarm system isn't already using IP and/or 4G for its alarm signaling, it will need to be upgraded before they switch to all IP for their phone services. If they don't do something, they could be left unprotected. Remember, many different systems may use PSTN to operate, including lift alarms, building management systems, and power alarms. Any alarm system should be considered. All communications will run on this new all-IP network by 2025. Phone companies will contact their customers to tell them when the switchover will take place for them. If you need more information about how the change to all-IP will affect your customers, go to redcare.bt.com for more information.
Well, good morning again to everybody. And just to explain a bit about my background, as you heard, my name's John Livermore. I work for OpenReach, but I've worked both for the alarm industry in the past, in BT on the All-IP program, in BT Security, and more recently, back in October, I joined the All-IP program again to do industry engagement, which is to reach out to all the industries in the UK. Certainly the alarm industry is absolutely important to us, the telecare industry and many other industries, right the way through to government, devolved governments, and also things like critical national infrastructure. I work with my colleague Phil Laws, as you can see on the slide, and we are OpenReach. But what exactly are OpenReach? A lot of people say, well, is that BT OpenReach? What does that mean? Let me just explain for a second or two who OpenReach are. OpenReach are basically the people that collect everything in the street from the telephone exchange through to the customer's premises. We are not BT, and we are a supplier to 650 or so communications providers. Some of them are listed on this slide, people like Sky, TalkTalk, Gamma, BT and Daisy, and these are our customers. But in fact, you are their customers, and your customers are also their customers. If you look at the FTT build note on this, we're spending a huge amount of money, billions of pounds, on a new network, as Nick mentioned earlier. The reason for that is the existing network has served us very, very well and for many, many years. But of course, it is getting older. In fact, for those of you old enough to remember the 80s, System X exchanges came in about then, and they are now 35 to 40 years old. The people that put them in no longer work for the company. The parts are getting harder to get hold of. And so therefore the industry, with the blessing of Ofcom, have decided that everything needs to change. And fibre really is the way ahead. The reason for that is, as you'll be aware, in terms of copper, it is a wonderful medium that served us well for many, many years, and it is actually going to be around for many years to come in a different form. But ultimately, fibre gives us far greater benefits, everything from much wider bandwidths to be able to put much more in terms of data down the pipes and so on. It opens up things like the Internet of Things and almost the imagination of the industry in terms of what it can do with it. It revolutionises alarm signalling, although it's been around for some while. This is something that really we need to get behind because it's all that's going to be around in years to come. For that reason, it has been decided as an industry with the government backing through Ofcom that by the end of 2025, the analogue service as we know it will no longer exist. And then thinking about just to position ourselves again, our interest in OpenReach is communications providers. And through this slide pack, we'll be talking about CPs quite a bit. So we're talking about communication providers, as we said earlier, people like Sky and BT and so on. But actually, the end customer, that's you and that's your customers, are all going to be affected by that. And so those CPs are doing their own thing. We also want to reach out to you and to your customers when the time is right, but particularly through you to make sure you're aware of what all IP really means and the effect it's going to have on the industry. In fact, this change is so great that it will affect at least three things. Number one, you at home. It'll affect, number two, your businesses, your offices, and number 3, your customers and their premises. Let's just think then about that term all IP. In the industry, you hear lots of different terms, and a lot of them mean the same thing. In terms of the IP program or the all IP program, what it says is pretty much, if you think of IP, it means the internet protocol. If you think about all IP, it means everything's going to be on the internet in future. You've also seen on the slide this term WLR, withdrawal. So let's just spend a moment talking about what that means. There's lots of jargon in this, but don't get hung up on it. WLR simply means wholesale line rental. It's a product name for a suite of products. And within that suite of products are what many people call the PSTN line. Some call it the copper line. Some people call it standard old, plain old telephone service, POTS. But ultimately, we're talking about what's been in the streets and in our homes for many, many years. And if you think about the network itself, it was designed for telephone calls. We made a call and someone received a call. And then along came broadband, digital, and all those things we've had to overlay on top of the line. In fact, now very few people know what's at the other end of the line. We as Openreach don't know what people have got plugged in at their premises, any more than many times the consumer, the communications provider, the CP. And so therefore the date that's been set for this final day, as it were, is the 31st of December 2025, which means that when we wake up on the 1st of January 2026, the world in terms of telecoms is going to be a very different place. I don't think I'm underestimating to say this is the biggest change we're going to see in telephony in our country in our lifetime. I don't say that lightly because it's huge. It's a massive change, and we all need to be aware of it and ready to move. In terms of helping to focus the minds of communications providers, we have to remember that they all have to migrate all of us as customers over to an all IP solution by the end of 2025. It can't happen in November 2025. It has to happen over the next 5 years. This program has been going on since 2018, and yet we've seen little movement around the country. The time now has really been shortened. There's around 15 million lines in the UK, and only now, well, less than 60 months to do that transition. That means that we have to, on average, transform at least 60,000 lines a week, which is a tough task. And each week that we prevaricate, that number gets higher. It's for that reason that Openreach have instructed communications providers that in September 2023, which is coming up even faster, there will be issued a national stop sell. Now, a little bit more about what stop sell means later, the next slide. But for now, just think about it in terms of the fact that from September 2023, communications providers, CPs, will no longer be able to take from Openreach what they do today in the way of PSTN lines, ISDN2, ISDN30. That WLR portfolio will all cease to be offered a new supply, and a little bit more as well, which I'll come to shortly. Also, as mentioned earlier, the other part of the All IP program is the rollout of full fibre, as the expression is sometimes called. But we're talking about fibre to the premises, fibre that goes end to end from the telephone exchange all the way through to the customer's premises. We've got about 4 million premises covered at the moment, but that's not nearly enough. Openreach's aspiration is that by the end of this decade, there will be around 20 million homes and businesses passed with fibre to the premises. But again, that isn't enough. That means that by the time 2025 comes, there'll actually be 2 products left into the portfolio. One of those is fibre to the premises, and the other one is what we today know as fibre to the cabinet. But we'll talk a bit more about that on the next diagram. But bear those things in mind. That will be what is left in the UK. Now, again, this talk about stopping selling the older products to try and focus people's minds on transitioning to the newer ones means that Openreach are extending that stop sell and moving it forward where we believe there's enough fibre to cover that exchange area. Some of you will be aware that in Salisbury, in Wiltshire, there's been a trial by Openreach now for over a year, and it's got about 90% of the premises in that area covered by full fibre to the premises. And for that reason, we let know to the industry that from the 1st of December last year, we will already invoke a stop sell in that exchange area. So you may think, well, yeah, but that's one exchange. There's about 5,500 in the UK. If I don't live in Salisbury, what's the problem? Well, the issue is this, that also to move this along, where we are putting fibre to the premises into areas, and we know that we're going to hit a rate of around 75% coverage of premises in an area, we are also bringing the stop sell forward in those areas. To date, there's a list of 169 exchanges that are going to hit stop sell this year. Last June, because we have to give a 12-month notice to the industry, Openreach let know to the industry that there will be 117, that's 117 exchanges, which would move into stop sell in June this year. So we're just 5 months away now from those 117 exchanges being added to Salisbury as a stop sell area. Try and think of that stop sell phrase now as being exactly that, a phrase, because you're going to hear about it more and more. Stop sell, stop sell. On top of that, in October last year, another 51 exchanges were added to that list. So in October this year, that 51 would also hit its stop sell threshold. That means that 169 will all be stop sell by the end of October. This month, sometime this week, hopefully, we're going to get the next batch out. And then from then on, every quarter, we're going to see another batch of exchanges given 12 months notice. And in 12 months after that, they will hit their stop sell banding. That means that from June this year, we'll be catching up with ourselves. In other words, the first batch will hit stop sell and another batch will be given 12 months notice. So from June this year, every quarter, we're going to see some exchanges hit stop sell and others being given 12 months notice for their stop sell. But what does stop sell actually mean? I did mention it was more than the obvious. So let's have a look at that together. This slide is simply called the impacts of stop sell. It's a little bit jargonistic, but let me try and cut through it for you. It says that stop sell in an exchange context, when you hit that date threshold, doesn't mean just new supply. It also means things like working line takeovers. So for working line takeovers, think moving house. If you are moving into a house in a stop sell exchange area, then that means that your CP can take you on, but they cannot take you on the WLR analog product. They will have to offer you either fibre to the premises or a form of fibre to the cabinet. They will be the only options. And they will not give you a voice product. That has to be an internet voice product from your communications provider. Also, CP transfers on the list. Simply, if you get fed up with your CP and say, I'm going to move from CPA to CPB, if you're in a stop sell exchange area, you can do that. But actually, the new CP takes you on and will have to put you on the fibre to the premises or fibre to the cabinet. Now, of course, in most cases, it should be fibre to the premises. The whole point of these stop sell exchanges is because fibre to the premises has been rolled out. But if you are in an area that hasn't got, for any reasons, fibre to the premises, maybe because it's more rural, they will still try and move you over to fibre to the cabinet. There are other things on there as well, such as stop or start lines, bandwidth modified. That kind of means that even if you upgrade your package, there's going to be some kind of change. What it means in essence is that if you're in a stop start exchange area, you can sit there happily on your older PSTN line, as it were, until your CP gets round to migrating you over. But it means you can't do anything new or change anything. You have to move over to something that is all IP. Let's just have a look now, very simplistically, at what that means in the network. So today, you'll all recognise the street cabinet. And on this slide, you see that we've called out that there are 5,500 telephone exchanges which are cared for. And Openreach look after the bit, if you like, from the telephone exchange out to the cabinet. Then it usually goes to a distribution point. If you haven't highlighted on this slide, but you'll know what a telegraph pole looks like, or you can imagine something in an underground chamber, a distribution point. And then there's your alarm, but it could be your phone. It could be a telecare device. It could be anything on the end. As I said earlier, we don't know what's on the end of that line. It'd be like asking your electricity company what kind of fridge you've got. It's just something we don't know. So let's follow the path then today. Today, if you follow the green line down, that's copper. The copper goes from the telephone exchange. And that WLR product we called about earlier, the reason it's significant is because Openreach sell to ACP a bundle. What's in the bundle? Well, it's the copper path, but it's also got a voice product. It's got the ability to actually have voice. It provides 50 volts down the line. It provides dial tone, and it gives you the ability to make a voice call. That's what is in the package called WLR, which we know as PSTN, although other variants are available without that voice product. That's what's being withdrawn, this product with the voice attached to it. So today, typically, if you're a singleton customer and you don't have broadband, well, you have that voice product down the green path, the copper path, into the street cabinet, out the other side, and at the end of it, you've got your phone or your alarm in our case today. If you have broadband, particularly if you have perhaps a slower broadband package, you're still putting a modem at the end of the premises, but it's still going over copper all the way. Now, some of us today, but most of us, have access to fibre to the cabinet, FTTC, and 95% of the UK is covered with that. So that's why 2025 is still a viable date, because although we don't have fibre to the premises everywhere, we already have a network that's cost billions of pounds in upgrading and changing things to make sure that there is fibre from the street cabinet to the telephone exchange. But fibre to the cabinet today is perhaps a little bit unknown in terms of the architecture. So let's spend a second or two on that. If you've asked for some kind of super fast broadband package from your CP, they will take fibre to the cabinet. And what that means is that the copper path from the premises through to the cabinet remains. It stays in situ. The difference is you end up almost with this V-shaped. Your voice calls continue to go back over the copper path to the telephone exchange, but your internet gets a big boost over fibre. So if you're on fibre to the cabinet today, the likelihood is that when you pick up the phone, you're actually using the copper end of that leg. If you're using the internet, the data is going down the fibre because it's splitting at the exchange. Now, why voice is important is because it is the very voice part of it that very often alarm companies and many other companies have used over the years for voice band data to provide MF tones and signals over that leg. The third thing I mention on this slide calls out fibre to the premises. So today, let's just summarise. WLR, copper all the way through, fibre to the cabinet, copper's still there from the premises to the cabinet, but then fibre, and full fibre to the premises all the way through. At the end of 2025, things are going to change, and this is what's going to be left. That whole green box disappears. So again, from the 1st of January 2026, when we wake up, effectively, that leg there has gone. That means that all that's left to us is fibre to the premises. And you notice that FTTC, fibre to the cabinet, has been renamed to SOGEA or SOGFAST. Now, these are brand names. Don't get hung up on them. Don't worry about them. The difference between SOGEA and the SOGFAST is that they are both fibre to the cabinet variants, but they have lost that ability to pass calls now over the copper path from the street cabinet back to the telephone exchange. That bit now has gone. It doesn't mean we've dug up the road. It means that the exchange equipment effectively that's providing that service, the voice service, has been taken out of service itself. That means that what is left is fibre to the premises and fibre to the cabinet without that copper path from the street cabinet back to the telephone exchange. And that's why it's been renamed to delineate it from the existing product. The difference between SOGEA and SOGFAST is that SOGFAST is the same, but it has actually usually a small cabinet next to it that gives the internet, the broadband, a bit of a boost. So you pay a bit extra because you get faster speeds. But the architecture is the same. Let's just think about it for a moment. All that's left after 2025, fibre to the premises and fibre to the cabinet, though it's now called SOGEA because it's lost the other leg. Now, I did also mention that between now and 2025, all communications providers are going to have to migrate all of us in the country over to this. So even now, if you call up your CP, they may be saying to you things like, yeah, we'd like you to have super fast broadband, but we'd like you to give up now the ability to make calls over that copper path. We want you, in fact, to make your calls over the internet and only the internet, because they're already migrating people from FTTC to SOGEA ready for the 2025. And it's being done very much on the basis of encouragement. But there will come a time, and of course we don't know timescales. Certainly we don't know timescales for CPs, because commercial sensitivity means it's unlikely they're going to send out to the industry what they're going to do. They may, but it seems unlikely, because it would give their rivals certainly a head start on things, knowing exactly what they're going to do and when they're going to do it. So that means that in all likelihood, the first we'll know about it is when they contact an exchange area and they say, right, on such and such a date, your exchange for our purposes as a CP is going over to all IP, and they will give a list of instructions to customers of what they have to do on that day. But the truth is that in any given road, there will be customers with different communications providers, and they will all go over potentially at different times. So one number one in the street may actually have moved over to Sogea, for example. Number 3 may still be sitting on another CP's network, and number 5 may be in a different one, but they all have to get there by 2025. So at any time now, any of us in the country could be contacted and be told by a CP that they are moving things over, and they have to do it in a more robust form because time is getting on. I want to spend a moment or two talking about the inside of the premises, because I think this is going to be important to understand as well, particularly for the alarm industry. And many of you have heard these presentations before and know that, but it kind of bears just going through it again. In the premises today, usually you have a master socket, and the master socket itself may have maybe an ADSL filter coming out of it, or maybe it's got 2 ports, and you've got plugged into one side your broadband, and in the other side you've got plugged in maybe a standard phone, or maybe it's the alarm, or whatever it might be. At the far end of the premises, if you like, there may be extension sockets, and the extension sockets may have all sorts of things on it, as we mentioned earlier. It could be the alarm, it could even be things like chip and pin machines. We've even found fax machines being used out there. In fact, in the legal industry, they're still using them for things like Premier League football transfers on deadline day. So too, you notice that we've got power needed for our deck phone and power needed for our router, for our broadband. Now, come the transition day, so this is earlier than 2025, when your CP says to you, right, we're going to move you over to all IP, you'll notice what happens. It means that the right-hand side there, all the extension sockets cease to work. That's simply because the 50 volts no longer comes down. You have basically moved that service onto either fiber to the premises, or you've moved it to fiber to the cabinet, so GEA, which means you've given up that voice path. That means the extensions now don't work. It means that 50 volts is no longer coming down the line for things like line cut. It means that inside the premises, what you're left with is a master socket, in the case of Sogea, then your router, and then anything in the premises has to be attached somehow to that router. Now, obviously, Wi-Fi is the obvious way of doing it. IP technology that speaks through Wi-Fi to the router is also the ideal. And some will say, well, I've heard already that CPs are going to put an analog port in the back of the router, so I'm kind of covered. Can I just give you a health warning on that kind of thinking? I've heard it in a number of industries. People say, oh, don't worry, the CPs will put a socket in the back and you just plug everything in there. There's a number of ifs associated with that. Number one, if that CP, remembering there's 600 odd of them, is actually going to provide that kind of router to you, if they're going to either give it to you free of charge or you're going to have to pay for it, you're still going to have to subscribe to their voice over IP service. If you've got the router with an analog port in the back and that customer of yours subscribes to the service, then will that equipment, when plugged into the back of that port, continue to work? It may well get 50 volts out of it. It may also get dial tone and all that good stuff. But in terms of the internet, we know that it's possible, just sometimes, to have little kind of dropouts. If you've used Skype a lot recently, or Teams, or even this call, maybe your broadband speed affects the quality of the call, and therefore you didn't really need that equipment tested. Nick mentioned earlier that BT have a test though. Openreach we hope to have our own one by late spring. COVID has stopped us doing that for now, but we're working on that in the background. Our encouragement to you is to test equipment, speak to people like Redcare and other suppliers to make sure that whatever equipment you get is going to work in the environment. Put simply, anything today that is plugged into the wall socket, if it is anything other than broadband, it will not work on transition day. When your CP comes to you and says, today's a transition day, that's what's going to happen. And of course, I must give you notice. How much notice will be down to them, but ultimately, they will give you some kind of notice. When that day comes, you have to remember that anything plugged in the wall socket, other than your router, will not work. It will have to be connected to the router somehow. Everything becomes all IP. Everything works only over the internet. So what should I do now? The obvious question that you're asking. Now, many of you know this and will already be doing it, but our call out to you is think about the services that you've got, think about who you buy them from, think about who you sell them to, think about exactly what's going on at the premises, and will your products work in that environment? Think about things like recommissioning, because from OpenReach's perspective, we will not, and you'll be very pleased to know, touch your alarm equipment. Even if we have to go into a premises to set things up inside, we will not be touching things that do not belong to us. It's not our job, and we'd be wrong to do so. So whether that's telecare, alarms, or anything other, that is down to the supplier to do that. We will not be saying to the people things like, don't worry, we'll sort it out for you. We will not do that. That is your role. You will have to recommission those, and you'll thank us for that, I'm sure. Again, the thing we haven't really touched on too much, but it's really important, is battery backup. Remember that if you have now, today, a power cut in your area, the phone line just works because you're getting 50 volts. You won't get that on migration, and you certainly won't get it after 2025. How are you going to keep that router powered? There are battery backup units around, but it depends on whether you can pay for those, want to pay for those, or supply them elsewhere. The thing to remember is that fiber to the premises, as we saw in the last slide, you move over from something called an NT5, which most of you know, a socket, to an ONT, which is the name for the socket replacement, the thing, the box of tricks, if you like, that makes FTTP work. That also needs power. So potentially in a fiber to the premises installation, you need power to the ONT and you need power to the router to keep that service going. Get yourself a plan now. There seems a lot of time to talk to people, oh, 2025 is a long time away, 2023, it isn't a long time, it really isn't. And as those stop-sell strangers start to bite, CPs will start to realise, as they do now, that change has to happen. 2025 isn't going anywhere. It's not going to be 26, 27, 30, as people wish it, because the network is not up to it. We want a 21st century network. At the moment, we're still using one that is much older than that, as you appreciate. Carry out an impact assessment. What have you got? Is it going to work? Try and trial it, test it. If CPs have test labs, get out to them, test your equipment in those environments. The other thing we'd like to encourage you to do, there's a link on the slides that will be sent out afterwards, where you can register for the OpenReach quarterly newsletter. Keep tabs on progress on openreach.com. We do hope to have an exciting new test lab ourselves in a few months' time. And we also wish to have and hope to have an all IP page, something that is not for consumers and something that isn't for CPs, something specifically for people like yourself in the industries, so that you can check up on what's going on. So, in summary, please continue to talk to us, talk to your suppliers. This is something that's going to happen and it will affect all of us. Remember I said at the beginning, you personally at home, your offices, your customers will all be affected by this. It will happen over the next 5 years, and some of it has to happen this year because time is running out. On the slide, you'll notice that we have a general all IP at OpenReach website, and rather email address. That's my address and my colleague Phil Laws. I want to again be able to thank Phil and Darren and his team for the time today, and thank you for your time. And just really to get on board with the fact this is so important and we need to move it forward. Again, thanks for your time, and then we'll now hand you back to Nick.
Thanks, John. It's really useful and worth spending a bit of time on that, just to go through that in detail. I know we've had quite a few questions come in, which hopefully you'll be able to expand on our Q&A. Okay, so now I want to reveal an exciting new Redcare product in our next generation portfolio that we've been working on and we're launching today. So our new product is called Essential IP, and it'll help you to make upgrading these PSTN alarm signaling systems much easier. It connects to your customer's broadband over Ethernet or Wi-Fi for a quicker install, and it exceeds the SP2 performance levels, which is equivalent to the old grade 2. Reporting path faults within 60 minutes, which is much faster than the traditional digital communicators. Installer Mike has recorded a short video for us that will take us through some of the key points.
Hi, I'm Mike, a BT Redcare installer. and I've been invited to take you through just how easy it is to install Essential IP. So what do you get? There's an insert which gives you an overview of the configuration menu and the Wi-Fi signal strength display, and 2 stickers for your customer's property to let everyone know it's protected by Redcare. And then there's the hardware. An aerial, some sticky mounting pads, and of course, the alarm signalling unit. Essential IP is a single path system that uses the customer's broadband or network to connect to the Redcare platform and signal your alarms to the ARC. Essential IP can be wired to your customer's router or network switch. You can also use the customer's Wi-Fi network for an easier install. Let's take a closer look at the unit. The programming or menu navigation buttons are here. You'll notice the up arrow also doubles as a WPS button. And serial connections, ground transmit and receive, labelled TXB and RXA, are here. You'll find the outputs under comms and func. And dial capture is here. If you plan to connect the alarm signalling unit to the customer's Wi-Fi, the aerial attaches here, top right. Or if you're going to connect it using an Ethernet cable, the Ethernet connection port labelled ETH is here. Essential IP is simple to set up. To start, connect the Ethernet cable from your customer's broadband or network into the Ethernet port labelled ETH. It's set up to work dynamically, but can be programmed for a static IP address using the onboard programming menu. Alternatively, if you're going to use Wi-Fi, connect the aerial to the unit. You can set up output 2 labelled func, so your customer can remotely control the output using the BT Redcare app. Power the unit up with 12 volts. It takes about 5 seconds for the OLED display to come on. If you don't do anything else, the display will switch off after about 5 minutes. When it's off, press and let go any of the programming buttons to switch it on. The unit will try to connect to the Redcare platform using the wired IP path as soon as it powers up. It takes less than a minute for the device to connect to the platform. So make sure you let the ARC know and put the unit on test. If you don't touch any of the other programming options, you'll get a status update on the display. When it's connected, it'll read path Ethernet registered, and at the same time, it will send a series of alarm events to the ARC. Some pin alarms, a restore to let them know the unit is back up, and a system reset alarm to let them know that the unit has been rebooted. The display will also scroll through and show service grade. If there are any alarm pins outstanding, it'll show them too. If you're going to connect over Wi-Fi, then the easiest way to set up is using WPS. Press the WPS button on your customer's router, and within 2 minutes, press and hold the up arrow marked with WPS on the Essential IP unit. The display will initially show Path Wi-Fi discovering, then Path Wi-Fi connecting, and when successfully connected to the platform, it'll show Path Wi-Fi registered. Similarly, when connected, it'll send a series of alarm events to the ARC. The display will scroll through path status, Wi-Fi signal strength, service grade, and will show any outstanding pin alarms. If the router doesn't have WPS, then you can configure the Wi-Fi network using the Essential IP access point or the programming buttons. Thanks for watching.
As you can see in that video, the Essential IP is really easy to install. Holding a unit here and see how small it is. Setting it up to use over Wi-Fi or Ethernet is almost as simple as plug and play. And like our other next generation portfolio products, push button programming and an OLED display also make configuring hassle-free. But as always, if you run into problems, our UK-based 24/7 technical help desk is always here to help. Essential IP also comes with enhanced monitoring, end-to-end encryption, and works with the Redcare app. You can access our full Essential IP training video, installation guide, brochures, and installer handbook on our website page, which we'll post in the link there. It's our entry-level product and is competitively priced. and there's nothing to pay until you activate it or if you've had it for 3 months. Plus, you'll get a 10-year product guarantee. Please speak to your ARC for pricing and ordering information. I think you'll find that it is very competitively priced. Okay, so we've got about 8 minutes left. We'll probably run over 5 minutes because we've got a huge number of questions. So I'll hand straight over to Darren to run this session. Darren, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Thank you, John. Obviously, you've now heard what our key speakers have had to say about the switchover. So I think it's time we answer a couple of your questions, and Nick and John answer some of those. So there's still time for you to submit some more questions, but thankfully we've had a lot of questions in for you guys. There's a lot of things we can hopefully try to answer. Unlikely we'll get through all of them today, but please be assured that we will come back to you directly and give you answers to those questions. So obviously we've got to finish off with it by 10:02, I believe. So the first question I've got here, I will aim this one at, this is one of the first questions that came in. Nick, this is from Andrew. I'll just find it here on Slido because there's lots of them for us to go and run through. Can you confirm and clarify regarding the Secure 2 and 3 products that currently use PSTN as a secondary path? Will these need swapping out for a product from the new portfolio, or are they IP equipped, Nick?
Okay, on that one, yeah, so Secure 2 and 3, as Andrew said, it's got the PSTN backup, uses dial-up PSTN. Our recommendation is that you do upgrade them. So Secure 2 and 3 have IP built into the unit. So it is a case of when the customer upgrades, you would need to wire an Ethernet cable direct from the customer's router into the Secure 2 and 3, and you can process that upgrade through your ARC. So yes, you can upgrade.
Okay, thanks, Nick. This one will go over to John. It's from Paul Smith. With the switchover due to be complete in 2025, is there a plan of which areas of the community will switch over first and when? I think you touched on part of that in your presentation. Is it mentioned, it was mentioned that customers would be contacted before the switchover, so how much notice would they get? Now, a lot of questions we've had, John, are kind of duplicated as well. I think one of the questions as well you could probably answer is, why has there been no sort of big TV campaign about the switchover? So if you can answer those questions.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Paul, for that, and others for those as well. So let me try and pick off the bits and pieces out of that. In terms of when will we know, that's very much down to every communications provider. So each one will have their own plan, and Openreach aren't aware of that. So at the moment, we have not been given any plans by any communication provider. We very much would like to see those plans because obviously we need to put feet on the ground in some of those areas to be able to support that switch over. Having said all of that, we do understand that communications providers have very sensitive information because they're all, of course, competitors. There's over 600 of them out there, and potentially they could be giving away information that could be to their detriment. So there are no plans that we are certainly aware of, but we are constantly putting pressure on because we need this to happen. And what makes Openreach very happy is seeing large numbers of migrations happening, certainly during this year, because as I said earlier, the problem is the longer it waits, the bigger that number is, and the more support that we have to give, and we want to make sure that we can do that. In terms of the Openreach plans, there is a link on the openreach.com website, and I can give that to the folks at Redcare to send out to you afterwards. It's just a standard page, but there is a map on there, and you can see in that map where FTTP is being built. It doesn't say which date it's going to be built, but it does show all the areas of the country. And our position is that we're not just going to just chock up London and Birmingham, Manchester, the big urban conurbations. There will be FTTP around the country. So again, although it won't be enough to cover the whole country by 2025 or indeed by 2030, we are certainly in a position where we are trying to get as much out as we can and let all parts of the country have access to it where we can as well. I think the other part of that, Darren, just the last bit again.
It was, why has there been no TV campaign?
No TV. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So it's a really good and very important question, and something that I've asked in the past myself. A lot of people say, "Well, isn't this like the TV switchover? Isn't exactly what we had when we went from analog to digital?" And in many ways, it's a good analogy, but actually this is far, far more complex. And it is more than just, of course, tuning your set or changing your set as it may be. So it's completely different in that respect. However, having said that, there was a public campaign. My understanding is that the government at the moment and Ofcom do not have any plans to do advertising on TV. Partly, I think this is monetary, because if you appreciate, when we first started talking about this in 2018, the government was worried about Brexit and what that would do. When we started talking about it more recently, COVID has mopped up pretty much every penny the government has got. So it would be nice to think that there would be a campaign over the next couple of years. Currently, we're not aware of that. There's also an argument, I guess, that communications providers are saying, well, we don't want end customers to know. We don't want currently all of our thousands and thousands of customers at the end of this to know this, because we can't cope with the inbound calls. If it was an advertising campaign of 5 million people phone tomorrow their communications providers, they're not the switchboards over. So it's being paced, I suppose, from their point of view. But ultimately, I would hope that this year we start to see some real movement and that people are starting to talk about it. Because my worry is that if things don't move, remembering that I certainly came onto this in 2017, there's been very little movement in other parts of, in all industries really, and probably telecare and alarms were the first ones that we contacted. So really and truly, time is running out. The network is not going to be extended. We do need to get this done. So I would expect you to hear something this year from your communications providers. But when that's going to be is very much down to them.
Okay, thank you, John. Nick, there's another question here for you. It's from Kevin. Regarding the Redcare Classic and GSM, when will these stop? So I think we hear that quite a lot, that question from a lot of our customers.
Yeah, and lots been happening, as John's talked about, with the commitment to fibre to the premise. In fact, Openreach are even now consulting about the longevity of copper and the withdrawal of copper. And also, obviously, with the continued migration away from these products. So we've decided that we'll keep the Classic and GSM network running till the end of 2025. We've done it in terms of the timing, so it's in line with the PSTN closure to make it an easier message for our ARCs installers and our customers. But essentially, it's no longer feasible or cost effective for us to keep that platform running beyond 2025. So we'll follow the timelines of the PSTN withdrawal and watch out over the next few months for some further information and some more exciting product news.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for explaining that. A question from Matthew. Are we as BT Redcare producing any literature that business can use to inform their customers of this change? So I'll take that one. Yes, we are. We're creating some dual branded literature that people can use, whether that's be part of the Digi campaign, just the IP campaign, that can be dual branded. So it's on behalf of installers, or it can be from ARCs to their installers. Just to help spread the word and make sure we get that campaign out, and for the end users to realise it's backed by BT Redcare, the big BT, and it's not installers trying to push a new system onto their end user. So we're trying to do that and work in conjunction with our customers and make sure we get that news out to as many customers as we can. So yeah, again, please speak to your Redcare sales contacts, and we'll be happy to brand those with you. So quite a few more questions coming in, and as I mentioned, we won't get to all of these, but there's some good relevant questions. Nick, here's one for you. Do we have full remote connection to the Essential IP?
It's got the same capability of the other next gen products. So it'll work with the app, with the portal. In terms of the connection to panels, it's got the same connectivity. It's got dial capture on board. It's got 8 pins. It's got serial connections.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Another question here. The anonymous, this one. Essential IP appears to be single path only. What dual path systems do we have available? So we have a multiple selection of dual path at different grades as well. So we have the advanced and advanced extra, which is IP and 2G, 4G based. We also have the essential extra, which is a radio product at 4G. So those, and we also have the ultimate product, which has its own private IP and a 4G path. So there's multiple products. They're all listed on our website, or you can contact the BT Redcare sales team for more information. So I think looking at the time, we've already run over. So I think we're going to have to look at closing the session today, unfortunately. Many questions we have, but we will make sure we get back to answering them. So thank you for joining our online webinar. Hopefully you now understand why the UK is switching to all IP and how you can prepare and protect your customers with our next generation products, and also what those opportunities are that it can unlock for your business. So I'd appreciate if you can complete our short feedback survey that will be going on your screen now. If you want to learn more about the IP switchover and also the BT Redcare next generation products, please visit redcare.bd.com. And remember, you can also contact us or go to Twitter or our LinkedIn pages for more information. So if you'd like to talk to us or any of the team, you can contact us, and you can see all our details are listed on the BT Redcare site, and they'll be going on screen shortly afterwards as well for our sales team. So thanks again for joining us this morning. We look forward to speaking to you in the near future and helping in any way we can. So please keep well, grab a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye all.